The sound of a phone hitting the marble floor echoed through the silent lobby. Everyone froze. All eyes turned toward the small girl standing beside her mother, her voice trembling but clear as she said, "Appa?" The man in the expensive suit, Korea's most eligible CEO, paled instantly. His phone clattered and slid across the floor, the screen reflecting the bright lights of Zenith Innovations' grand lobby. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some employees instinctively lifted their phones to record the moment. Adisay held her daughter's hand firmly, her jaw tight, heart pounding but posture unwavering. Ara's cornrows shimmered under the soft lobby lights, and her Korean features made it impossible to ignore the resemblance. Adisay whispered softly, "Stand tall, Ara. This is our place." Ara nodded, wide-eyed, absorbing the gravity of the moment. Ji Hun stared, eyes locked on the child. 11 years of absence weighed on him, each second stretching longer than the last. What did you just say?" He finally croaked, his voice unsteady, betraying the composed image he always carried. The words sounded foreign to him, almost unreal. 11 years. A decade of forgetting. And now, this moment, a small child calling him father, demanding acknowledgement of a life he had tried to escape. The lobby had fallen completely silent. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Adisay's lips curled into a small, controlled smile. "She's waited a long time to meet you," she said. Calm, firm. Her voice did not tremble. It carried the weight of a truth that could no longer be denied. Ji Hun's hands clenched into fists. He opened his mouth, trying to speak, but no words came. Ara looked up at him with innocence and courage mingled in her eyes. "I am Ara Min-hee Kang. I am 10 years old. I speak Korean and English too. I have been waiting to meet you. Appa." Gasps erupted from the few employees brave enough to stay put. Phones were raised, screens capturing every second. Ji Hun's mind raced, a storm of disbelief, guilt, and panic churning violently inside. He glanced at Adisay, seeing a woman he once loved, standing tall, holding a child whose existence had shattered the life he meticulously built. Adisay's hand squeezed Ara's. "You deserve to know your father. That is why we are here." Her voice was unwavering, almost serene in its certainty. The calmness infuriated Ji Hun more than the confrontation itself. How dare she come here with a child and a demand for recognition? He finally found his voice, hoarse and brittle. This is impossible." His gaze flicked between Ara and Adisay, searching for any sign of deception, any hint that this was a lie. Why now? Why here? Adisay's eyes softened only for a moment, then returned to their steely determination. "Because the time to hide is over. She asked about you. She asked to know her father. You cannot run from her truth any longer." Ji Hun's phone lay forgotten on the floor, the screen still glowing faintly. Employees whispered, some in fear, some in awe. The tension in the lobby thickened, then, without a word, Ji Hun motioned for them to follow him toward the conference room. Every step he took seemed heavier than the last, the air around him charged with anticipation and dread. The glass doors of the conference room slid open. Ji Hun gestured for them to enter, his hands trembling slightly, betraying the composure he usually maintained. Ara's small hand gripped her mother's, and together they stepped into the room that overlooked the sprawling Seoul skyline. For a moment silence ruled. The city lights reflected off the polished floors, indifferent to the storm unfolding inside. Ji Hun's gaze fell on Ara again. 11 years of absence. 11 years of missed birthdays, first words, first steps. And now, a perfect reflection of himself standing in front of him, demanding acknowledgement. His voice, when it finally emerged, was low, fragile. "How old exactly are you?" "I am 10, turning 11 in March," Ara replied confidently. Her tone carried more bravery than Ji Hun felt in that moment. "My middle name is Min-hee. You and Mother chose it together, remember?" Adisay's lips pressed into a thin line. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind countless times. Her resolve had never been stronger. "We came with love and with proof," she said quietly, almost casually, though the words cut through the tension like a knife. "Everything you need to know is here." She lifted her phone slightly, letting the glow of the screen reflect her message. Documents, bank transfers, photos, and receipts meticulously saved over a decade. Ji Hun's chest tightened. Memories he had carefully locked away in a safe, memories he had told himself were irrelevant, came flooding back. He remembered London nights with a broken heater, the cold winter wind slipping through the cracks, and a young Adisay rubbing her swollen belly. He remembered promising her the world, swearing he would never leave. And yet, here they were. Before Ji Hun could speak, the doors burst open again. Sujin entered, her heels clicking against the marble floor, Chanel perfume trailing behind her. She stopped, eyes widening at the scene before her. Ara, standing tall, hand in hand with her mother. Ji Hun, pale and stiff. Who are they? Sujin asked, voice sharp, controlled. She tried to hide the flicker of fear and jealousy rising inside her. Her presence, meant to assert dominance as Ji Hun's fiancé, was suddenly questioned by the unexpected arrival of a child. Ara, unfazed, tilted her head and asked innocently, "Are you Appa's friend?" Sujin's face tightened. "I am his fiancée," she said coldly, "and I was not informed of this." Her words were precise, but her hands shook slightly. She did not expect a child, a daughter, to disrupt everything she had thought was settled in her life. Ji Hun opened his mouth, then closed it. His fiancée's sudden arrival escalated the tension, but the real storm was yet to come. There was a knock at the door, sharp, commanding. Ji Hun's parents entered. The room changed instantly. Mr. and Mrs. Kang carried themselves with the rigid posture of old money, wealth, and tradition. Mrs. Kang's eyes fell on Ara, narrowing. Disgust flickered across her face. Ara, oblivious to the harshness, called softly, "Grandmother?" The room froze. Mrs. Kang recoiled. The silence was suffocating. "Get rid of them." "Whatever it costs," she ordered sharply in Korean, her voice heavy with disdain and authority. Ji Hun's father's eyes were cold, skeptical. "Is this true? Are you certain?" he asked, voice laced with doubt and disapproval. Adisay, standing tall, did not flinch. "Everything she claims is true," she said, lifting her phone, showing documents, receipts, and photos accumulated over 11 years. "We are not here for money. We are here for truth, for recognition, for a family." The tension in the room was palpable. Employees outside peeked in, whispering and recording silently. Sujin's hands gripped her purse tightly. The Kang family, the symbol of corporate power and old money influence, faced a challenge they had not anticipated. A small child, a mother, and a decade of undeniable evidence. Ara, stepping forward, met Mrs. Kang's cold glare with determination. "We didn't come for money. We came because we are family. That's what matters. Not what you think, not what you want. We exist." Ji Hun's chest tightened. He wanted to intervene, to say something, to reclaim control, but he had no words. The little girl, his daughter, had spoken truth more bravely than he ever had. Adisay gently took Ara's hand, squeezing it. "Stay strong, my love," she whispered. Ara nodded, eyes bright, though tears threatened to spill. The power balance had shifted. The room, once dominated by wealth and authority, was now filled with the undeniable force of truth, resilience, and courage. Sujin's face paled further. "Ji Hun, is this true? Is she really?" she asked, voice trembling. Her question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Ji Hun looked at Ara, then at Adisay. His mind raced, heart pounding. 11 years of avoidance, 11 years of pretending it never happened, all collapsing in an instant. Finally, his voice cracked, broken and raw. "Yes," he whispered. Sujin's hand trembled as she removed her engagement ring and placed it on the table. Without another word, she turned, her heels clicking with authority, yet tinged with defeat, and left the room. Ji Hun sank into a chair. The weight of truth, of lost time, of missed moments, pressed heavily upon him. The employees, the parents, the fiancé, even the city lights outside, none of it could change the fact that a decade had passed, and now a child demanded acknowledgement. Adisay knelt slightly, bringing herself to Ara's level. "Remember, my love, this is your choice. Nobody can force you to forgive or accept anyone yet, but know your truth is never wrong." Ara nodded, absorbing the gravity of her mother's words. Ji Hun reached out slowly, almost hesitantly. "Ara, may I try?" Ara looked at him, eyes cautious but curious. "I don't know you yet," she replied softly. Her words were gentle but firm, boundaries clear, yet offering the tiniest spark of possibility. The room fell silent, holding its breath as father and daughter stared at each other. The narrative had shifted. A family once broken by absence, pride, and fear now faced the first step towards something new. Tentative, uncertain, yet undeniably real. Before the tension fully dissipated, a quiet voice, barely audible, encouraged viewers. If you're feeling the drama, the shock, the raw emotion, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. This story is only beginning, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The silence in the conference room was heavy, almost suffocating, as Ji Hun sat back in his chair, staring blankly at the child he had never truly known. Ara's small fingers twined with her mother's, holding tight, drawing strength from the woman who had always been her shield. The city skyline gleamed beyond the glass, a quiet reminder of the life Ji Hun had built, polished and perfect, but empty in ways he had never allowed himself to see. Mrs. Kang's eyes were sharp and unforgiving. She stood, arms crossed, as if daring Adisay to challenge her authority again. "Do you expect us to simply accept this?" she demanded in Korean, her voice cutting through the tense air like a knife. "A child we never knew existed? A scandal? This is unacceptable." Adisay met her gaze evenly. "Accepting it is not the point," she said softly but with unwavering strength. "Acknowledging the truth is." She tapped her phone lightly, letting the glow of evidence fill the room. Photos, bank statements, school records, all indisputable proof of the life she had raised alone, yet openly. Ara's voice trembled slightly as she spoke, though she refused to look away. "I didn't come here to hurt anyone. I just wanted to meet my father. I wanted to know if he was real." Her words were simple, but the emotional weight behind them was immense. Ji Hun's chest tightened. The little girl before him had the courage to speak her truth in a room full of people who wanted to deny it. 11 years of absence, and she was braver than he had ever been. Sujin's face was pale, her engagement ring now resting on the table like a silent witness to the chaos. She had thought she could step into Ji Hun's life and hold it together perfectly, but the appearance of Ara had changed everything. How is this possible?" she whispered. Her voice wavered, revealing the fear beneath her polished exterior. Ji Hun's father cleared his throat, sharp and dismissive. "Proof or not, this is a problem. The timing is suspicious. A scandal could ruin years of careful planning." His words were bitter, laced with fear of social embarrassment, more than concern for his grandson. Adisay's eyes met his, unwavering. "We are not here to cause scandal," she said firmly. "We are here for truth, for recognition. And the truth is, Ara is your daughter, your granddaughter. She deserves to know her family. That is all." The tension was unbearable. Every eye in the room seemed to lock on the small girl, whose expression was a mixture of hope and fear. Ji Hun felt a wave of guilt wash over him. 11 years had passed without him, and now he realized what he had lost, what he had abandoned. His voice was barely audible when he finally spoke. I didn't know." Ara's eyes narrowed slightly. "You didn't know?" she asked softly, but her voice carried a quiet firmness that demanded accountability. "I waited, every day, hoping you would come back. And now, you say you didn't know?" Ji Hun opened his mouth to respond, but the words stuck in his throat. He wanted to explain, to apologize, but he knew that no excuse could undo the years lost. Instead, he remained silent, letting the weight of his absence speak louder than any words could. Sujin stepped forward, voice trembling with anger and disbelief. "This changes everything, Ji Hun. Everything. We were supposed to be married in 3 weeks. How could you hide this? How could you—" She stopped, her voice breaking. She looked at Ara, then back at Ji Hun. "This is not just about a child. This is about betrayal." Ara looked at Sujin, confusion and hurt mixing in her eyes. "I didn't betray anyone," she said softly. "I just wanted to meet my father." Her words were simple, honest, and devastating in their purity. Mrs. Kang's lips pressed into a thin line. She stepped closer to the table, her eyes cold. "Do you expect us to just accept this?" she demanded again. "Do you think we will allow our family name to be tarnished because of your choices?" Adisay took a deep breath, steadying herself. "We do not seek acceptance from you," she said firmly. "We seek acknowledgement, nothing more. Ara deserves to know her father, and he deserves to meet his daughter. That is all we ask." The room was tense, the air thick with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. Ji Hun's hands trembled slightly as he ran them over his face. 11 years. 11 years of silence, absence, and avoidance. And now, everything had come crashing back into his carefully ordered world. He looked at Ara, Her small face turned toward him, eyes bright with a mix of hope and courage. I want to know you, he said finally, his voice breaking. I want to try. Ara's expression softened slightly, but she did not rush toward him. I don't know you yet, she said, her voice calm but firm. You have to earn that. Ji Hun nodded slowly. He understood. 11 years could not be erased in a single day. Trust could not be rebuilt in a moment, but he was willing to try. Soo-jin, watching silently, clenched her fists. Her engagement, her life as she had planned it, had been shattered in a single afternoon. She turned away, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Without a word, she left the room, leaving her engagement ring behind as a silent testament to the chaos that had erupted. Mrs. Kang and Mr. Kang exchanged glances. Mrs. Kang's face was tight with anger and disbelief. This is not over, she said quietly, her voice low but cutting. We will not let this continue. Adisay placed a hand on Ara's shoulder. Stay close to me, she whispered. Ara nodded, drawing comfort from her mother's steady presence. The little girl's bravery had been remarkable, but the storm was far from over. Ji Hun sank back into his chair, the weight of the past 11 years pressing heavily upon him. He thought of the nights he had spent building his empire, the decisions he had made to advance his career, and the moments he had missed. First steps, first words, first smiles. And now, here she was, a living, breathing reminder of all that he had abandoned. Ara looked around the room, taking in the absence of approval, the rejection from the adults who should have loved her unconditionally. She turned to her mother, seeking reassurance. Adisay squeezed her hand, offering silent support. Together they stood united, a small but powerful force of truth and resilience. Ji Hun's father spoke again, voice laced with skepticism. DNA test, he said flatly. That is the only way to prove this beyond any doubt. Adisay did not hesitate. Do it, she said firmly. We have nothing to hide. Ara has waited long enough. If a test is what it takes, we welcome it. Ara's small hand rested lightly on Ji Hun's arm. I just want to know you, Appa, she said softly. Not money, not approval, not anything else. Just you. Ji Hun swallowed hard. His throat felt tight. He nodded, the wordless acknowledgement of her presence, of her courage, of the truth she carried sufficing for the moment. The room fell silent again, except for the faint hum of the city outside. The employees who had been watching from the lobby whispered amongst themselves, some shaking their heads in awe, others in disbelief. The story, the confrontation, the truth, it was all unfolding like a live drama in the heart of Seoul. Soo-jin's absence left a space of tension, a reminder that life as Ji Hun had known it had changed irrevocably. His parents, rigid and cold, had yet to fully process the implications of the revelation. But for Adisay and Ara, the victory lay not in approval or acceptance, but in the undeniable truth. Ara's father was finally before her, facing what he could no longer avoid. Ji Hun's voice, soft now but resolute, broke the heavy silence. We will do the test, he said. And then, we will see. Ara nodded. She had waited for this moment her entire life, and though fear and uncertainty lingered, hope had found a place in her heart. She glanced at her mother, who smiled gently, a mixture of pride and reassurance. Together, they had faced the impossible and emerged stronger. Before the camera could pull back, a voice spoke softly to the viewers. If this story is pulling at your heartstrings, hit that like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. The story is just beginning, and you will not want to miss what comes next. The camera lingered on Ji Hun, sitting in the chair, head bowed slightly, eyes fixed on Ara. 11 years of absence, 11 years of lost moments, and now a chance, however tentative, to begin again. The following day, the tension at Zenith Innovations had not eased. The conference room, now cleared of most staff, was charged with anticipation. Ji Hun sat at the long, polished table, his hands folded, staring blankly at the documents on the surface. The DNA test kit sat between him and Adisay, its presence a quiet but relentless demand for truth. Ara stood beside her mother, small but unshakable, her eyes flicking between her father and the test that would determine the next chapter of their lives. Ji Hun exhaled slowly, trying to steady his nerves. The past 11 years weighed on him more heavily than ever. He had built a life of prestige and power, yet now a small girl with cornrows and curious eyes held the capacity to dismantle everything. He looked at Ara, remembering the innocent voice that had called him Appa, and the strength that had shone through her vulnerability. Adisay leaned slightly forward, her voice calm but firm. The test will prove what we already know. Ara is your daughter, but this isn't just about proof. It's about the choice you have from here on. Jin, whose absence the day before had made the confrontation even sharper, returned quietly, standing near the door. Her eyes were narrowed, lips pressed tightly. She had spent hours questioning herself, her fiancé, and the possibility that her carefully constructed life could unravel. "So, this is happening?" she asked, voice low and tinged with tension. "After everything, you still need proof?" Ji Hun's head rose slowly, eyes meeting hers. "It's not about needing proof for me. It's about closure. For her. And for you," he said, the words heavy but sincere. Sujin's jaw tightened. She didn't speak, but the flicker of betrayal in her eyes said more than any words could. Adisay carefully placed the DNA kit on the table. "We are ready when you are," she said. Ara's small hand rested lightly on her, mother's, a gesture of courage and solidarity. The tension in the room was palpable. Even the air seemed to hold its breath as everyone waited for the next move. Ji Hun reached out slowly, his fingers trembling slightly as he picked up the test swab. He knelt slightly to meet Ara's gaze. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. Ara nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Yes," she said, voice steady, though her heart raced. The procedure was brief, but the silence afterwards stretched unbearably. Ji Hun's hands hovered over the table, palms down, as though pressing against the surface could anchor him to the moment. Sujin's gaze never wavered, and Mrs. Kang's presence, though silent, radiated disapproval and cold authority. Finally, Ji Hun leaned back in his chair. "Now." "We wait," he said, voice low. Ara squeezed her mother's hand, and Adisay's lips pressed together in quiet determination. 11 years of unanswered questions had led to this very moment, and everything hinged on the result. Hours passed slowly. The office hummed quietly in the background as if reluctant to witness the unfolding drama. Employees peeked through the glass walls, curiosity overtaking discretion. The tension in the conference room was suffocating. Then the phone vibrated on the table. Adisay reached for it and opened the message. Her eyes flicked to Ji Hun's, holding his gaze firmly. "It's positive," she said softly. "Ara, you are his daughter. There is no question." Ara's eyes widened. "Really?" she whispered, voice barely audible but filled with wonder. Ji Hun's chest tightened as he leaned forward, absorbing the truth with a mix of relief, guilt, and awe. He had been faced with undeniable evidence of a life he had ignored, and now the proof was not only in words or documents, it was in science. His daughter existed. She was real. Sujin's face paled. She stepped back as if the weight of the confirmation had pushed her physically. She turned to Ji Hun, voice trembling. "Is this really true?" she asked, disbelief mixing with fear. "After all these years?" Ji Hun's eyes softened, looking at Ara with a mixture of sorrow and longing. "Yes," he said, voice low and steady now. "She is my daughter." Sujin's hands shook slightly as she picked up her engagement ring and placed it gently on the table. Her face betrayed the pain and betrayal she felt. I can't do this," she whispered. Without another word, she turned and left, her heels clicking sharply on the floor, echoing like a final punctuation mark to the drama that had unfolded. Mrs. Kang's lips pressed into a thin line. She remained silent, but her eyes were filled with a mixture of anger, disbelief, and grudging acknowledgement. Mr. Kang, too, sat back, his expression unreadable. They had been forced to face a reality they had tried to deny. A child they had never acknowledged now had undeniable proof, and a mother whose courage could not be challenged. Ji Hun leaned back, breathing heavily. He looked at Ara, who met his gaze with a mixture of caution and curiosity. I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice raw with emotion. 11 years? Gone. And now you're here?" Ara tilted her head slightly. "You don't need to say anything yet, Appa," she said softly. "I just wanted you to know, and I wanted to meet you. That's all." Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of a decade of absence, hope, and longing. Adisay placed her hand on Ara's shoulder. "You've done what you came to do," she whispered. "Now, let him show he's willing to try." Ji Hun nodded, swallowing hard. He had no words for the years lost, for the moments he had missed, but he knew that this was the first step. The acknowledgement, the DNA test, and the confrontation had begun to break down the walls he had built around his heart. Outside the room, employees whispered and glanced at one another, some shaking their heads, others murmuring about the courage of the mother and child who had faced the CEO and his powerful family. The story, once hidden, had become impossible to ignore. Ara, sensing the gravity of the moment, stepped slightly closer to Ji Hun. "I don't need a father who only exists on paper," she said softly. "I need someone who will be here. Will you try, Appa?" Ji Hun's throat tightened. He looked at the little girl who was both a stranger and a part of himself, realizing that everything he had built, wealth, power, prestige, could not replace this connection. "Yes," he said finally, voice firm, though it trembled slightly. "I will try." Adisay smiled softly, tears threatening to spill. "That's all we ask," she said quietly. Ara's small hand reached out tentatively, and Ji Hun held it gently, feeling the warmth and fragility of the connection he had missed for 11 years. The room fell silent for a moment, allowing the weight of the moment to settle. Then Mrs. Kang's voice cut through, sharp but controlled. "This is not over," she said in Korean. "We will not allow our family name to be tarnished. You will see." Ji Hun glanced at her, then at his father, and finally back at Ara. The storm outside, the threats, the family politics, they mattered little in this moment. What mattered was the child before him, the proof of a life he had abandoned, and the chance to begin again, however cautiously. Sujin's absence left a lingering tension. Her departure marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Ji Hun knew that the challenges ahead would be many, but for the first time in over a decade he felt the stirring of hope. Ara looked up at him, small face framed by cornrows, eyes bright and unwavering. "So, we start over?" she asked quietly. Ji Hun nodded. "We start over," he repeated. "Slowly, but we start." Adisay squeezed Ara's hand, a mixture of pride and relief washing over her. Together they had faced the impossible and emerged stronger, their bond unbroken. The confrontation had ended, the truth was undeniable, and now a new chapter was beginning. Fragile, uncertain, but filled with possibility. Ji Hun sat back in his chair, his hands resting lightly on the table. He stared at Ara, silently promising himself that he would not let history repeat. He had failed her once by absence. Now he had the chance to be present, to learn, to grow, and to try. The city outside shimmered, oblivious to the drama within, but inside that conference room, a small child and her mother had changed everything. 11 years of secrets, avoidance, and unspoken truths had finally met the light, and nothing could return the past to the shadows from which it came. The silence that settled in the conference room was not empty. It was heavy, charged with emotion, anticipation, and the fragile beginnings of understanding. Ji Hun sat quietly, fingers interlaced, staring at Ara with a mix of awe, guilt, and longing. 11 years had passed, and now, here she was, tangible, undeniable, and demanding the recognition he had avoided for far too long. Ara's small hand rested lightly on the table, fingers brushing against her father's. She hesitated, looking at Adisay, who nodded slightly, giving the unspoken permission. "You can try, Appa," Adisay whispered. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of trust and courage. "Start small, but start." Ji Hun reached out slowly, lifting her hand with trembling fingers. "Ara, I want to be here," he said, voice raw. "I want to know you. I want to try to make up for what I lost. I can't change the past, but I can be here now." Ara studied him carefully, her eyes wide but cautious. "It's not easy to trust someone who's gone for 11 years, she said softly, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "I need to see you mean it. I need to see you try, every day." Ji Hun nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand. And I will. I will try, even if it takes everything I have." The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside. Even Mrs. Kang and Mr. Kang, who had remained seated with stern expressions, seemed momentarily subdued. The undeniable truth of Ara's existence and the courage of her mother had shifted something in the air, a subtle, reluctant acknowledgement that this child, this life, could no longer be ignored. Ara glanced at Sujin's abandoned engagement ring on the table. A flicker of understanding crossed her face. "She left," she said simply, "because she realized she couldn't be part of this." Ji Hun's lips pressed together tightly. "Yes," he said quietly, "and perhaps it's better this way. This isn't just about anyone else. This is about us, about you and me." Adisay's eyes softened as she looked at both of them. You don't have to rush anything, she said gently. Trust is built slowly. And love, real love, is patient. Ara nodded, taking a deep breath, absorbing the weight and the hope of her mother's words. The atmosphere shifted as the conversation deepened. Ji Hun leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on the table. I want to know everything about you, he said. Your life, your school, your friends, the things you love. I want to be part of it, if you let me. Ara's eyes sparkled with cautious optimism. You really mean that? She asked. Yes, he replied, voice firm but tender. I've spent too long running from responsibility. I won't run from you. Not anymore. Sujin's absence left a ghostly tension in the room, a reminder that life had irrevocably changed. But Ara's courage, her innocence, and her insistence on truth had forced the walls of Ji Hun's carefully constructed life to crack open. For the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of something he had long avoided: accountability, connection, and love. Mrs. Kang spoke finally, her voice still sharp, but tinged with the faintest trace of reflection. You are his daughter, she said slowly, in Korean. The proof is undeniable. He must learn to be here or face the consequences of his absence. Ji Hun's father nodded silently, leaning back in his chair. It is time to face reality, he said, voice low. We cannot undo what has been done, but we can ensure that moving forward, responsibility is taken. Ara felt a swell of emotion but kept herself composed. I just want my father, she said quietly, voice shaking slightly. And I want us to try. That's all. Ji Hun's eyes softened, and he reached out, lifting her small hand once more. We will try. Every day. I promise, he said, the words carrying the full weight of his remorse and commitment. A pause settled over the room, heavy but quiet. The employees who had stayed behind to witness the drama whispered quietly among themselves, impressed by the courage of a child who had faced a CEO, a fiancé, and a family of power, all for the sake of truth. Adisay squeezed Ara's hand gently. This is only the beginning, she whispered. The rest is up to all of you. Ji Hun finally stood, moving closer to Ara. Do you want to walk through the lobby together? He asked, a tentative smile forming on his face. Ara nodded, taking her mother's hand, then lifting her small fingers toward her father. For a moment, the three of them, mother, daughter, and father, stood together, fragile but united. The conference room doors opened and the city skyline spread out before them, glittering with lights that seemed almost indifferent to the emotional storm within. Ji Hun felt a mixture of awe and humility. 11 years had passed, and yet here he was, staring at the child who had changed everything, realizing that the path forward would be slow, deliberate, and filled with challenges, but also hope. Outside, the hum of the city continued, oblivious to the momentous shifts within one building. The lobby, once filled with whispers and judgment, was now a silent witness to the beginning of a new chapter. Ji Hun held Ara's hand gently, careful, aware of the responsibility and the fragility of the bond being formed. Adisay walked beside them, eyes scanning the room with quiet pride. She had faced the storm, held her daughter steady, and now watched as a father began the journey of making amends. Ara's gaze flicked toward the exit, then back at her father. So? This is real? She asked softly. It's real, Ji Hun said firmly, and it's just the beginning. The weight of those words lingered in the air. 11 years of absence could not be erased, but acknowledgement and effort could pave the way for a future built on truth, love, and courage. Ara's small hand tightened in his, a silent agreement to try, to hope, to build something that had been denied for far too long. A soft voice, speaking directly to viewers, cut through the tension. If this story has moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share your thoughts. What would you do if you were in Ara's shoes? The journey is far from over, and you'll want to see what happens next. Every story has more to reveal, and this one is just getting started. Ji Hun looked at Ara and Adisay, his expression resolute. I will not fail you again, he said quietly, almost to himself. This time I will be here. All of me. All the time. Ara smiled faintly, a mix of relief and cautious optimism. Then we start now, she said. Adisay nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Yes, we start now. Together. The camera lingered on the trio, father, mother, and daughter, standing side by side. 11 years of absence, struggle, and unspoken truths had led to this fragile yet powerful moment. The journey ahead would not be easy. Rebuilding trust, bridging the gap between lost time, and facing a family unwilling to accept change would test them. But for the first time, there was hope. And hope, after all, was stronger than fear. The screen faded slightly, the narrator's voice echoing softly. Remember, every truth has power. Every child deserves their father. And every moment, no matter how long it takes, can lead to reconciliation. If you want to see what happens next, hit that like button, comment your thoughts, and subscribe. This story is far from over. Ji Hun glanced at Ara once more, lifting her hand to his face gently. I will be here, he whispered. Every day. I promise. Ara's eyes shimmered with trust and courage. I will hold you to that, she said. Adisay smiled softly, knowing that the battle had only just begun, but that they had already won the most important victory. The truth could not be denied, and the bond between a father and daughter had begun to form. The camera pulled back, leaving the family framed against the Seoul skyline, a quiet yet powerful image of resilience, truth, and new beginnings. The city continued to buzz, unaware of the fragile yet unbreakable bond forged in the heart of Zenith Innovations. And in that moment, for the first time in over a decade, Ji Hun felt a spark of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, love could indeed be a language worth learning again.